Hi everyone, welcome back to the BrainFit show. So this is the show where we talk about all things brain fitness, address some of the biggest myths surrounding the human brain, and help you in your quest to build the best learning brain. So joining me once again, Ian, are my co-host Ellie and
Hi, Ian.
BrainFit's founder and director Cheryl.
Hello, Ellie. Hello, Ian.
Hello, Cheryl.
Alright, so today we're going to be talking about the uniqueness of the human brain. So personalized brain testing, to be more specific. So the human brain is made up of 5 pillars. So I think we briefly mentioned this before, but just to run through again, it's made up of movement, visual, auditory, focus, and emotions, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay,
yeah.
should we qualify a very simplified
Okay,
way
yeah,
of
maybe-
understanding a complex
correct.
organ? Otherwise
Okay,
we
maybe
might not be fully accurate.
it's not exactly 5, but it can be thought about
Yeah.
in terms of these 5
5
different
broad areas,
categories,
yeah.
right? So what these 5 categories do is instead of just giving you a flat number for your IQ of, let's say, 120 or something, it tells you more specifically what areas am I lacking in, what areas do I need more attention in, and also, as we'll talk about later, it also can correlate well. Specifically, our CognitiveMAP test that we do here at BrainFit has shown to have some good validity, i.e., if you do, let's say, well on a visual reasoning test, you will be good in XYZ in real life as well. So we'll talk about all that in today's episode, right?
Sounds good.
All right. Also, we'll talk a bit about standardized testing as well. So basically, what does it mean when the CogMap is a standardized test,
Or any standardized
any
test,
standardized
for that
test in
matter,
general, yeah. How do we know it's not, random, just bluffing me, right? The results. All right. So
I think at this point, can I just address one of your points?
Yes.
A little bit about IQ. I mean, we get questions a lot. Is your test an IQ test, right? So where you have a number and the way I define IQ is really your ability to think and problem solve, right? So we call it the intelligence quotient, or how smart you are, how intelligent you are. But I think what is really important to know, and I think we already know it and all parents know, is that our child is not characterized by one number, right? I mean, I could be really weak in something, like I mentioned in the first episode, right? My visual skills aren't the best. I did not do well in my physics and, further math subjects, but I'm really good in my language subjects, right? So there is that different aspects of the brain, which then the 5 areas of the brain then helps us to understand this variability in human that is not so easily represented by, or not so accurately represented by that one number. Yes, it is an important number, but it is still only that one facet of your, complex brain function. Yeah, I just want to throw that in.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. I mean, after all, how exactly, one number, IQ tests nowadays, they have become more complex. So it's more than just one number. Now maybe they also tell you
They
break down.
into the different
Yeah,
parts.
into
Yeah,
the
for a very
various
sophisticated,
reasonings. Yeah.
complete IQ test.
Correct.
gives you all
So
that.
this is also similar to what our CogMap that we do here at BrainFit aims to do. So you can think about it just, as we mentioned before, in these 5 broad categories. So basically, we are trying to assess not really a number, but really a cognitive strength and weakness profile for each of these 5 categories.
Do we want to talk about first what is a standardized test?
Sure. Okay, so maybe I can talk
Yeah.
a little bit about that. So standardized testing is basically making sure that when you do the same test, everybody is, as the name implies, is doing the same test, So what does this actually mean? This means that the instructions are the same, the results are the same, and is compared to people who are similar to me. So what we mean by this, let's say your test is
Balancing
standardized.
on one foot.
Balancing on one foot, correct. So when we say, okay, balancing on one foot has to be standardized, we have to say, okay, so your foot has to be your preferred foot. Let's say, for example, your child taking this test is 4 years old, so the result will be compared against other children who are also 4 years old. And also the environment must be the same. So it cannot be like one on the side of the road and one in the room, right?
Or on the grass.
Or on the grass,
Yeah,
exactly.
the surface is
the
important.
temperature, even
Yeah.
like the instructor taking...
Temperature, maybe not so much for
Okay,
balancing.
maybe temperature not so much, but let's say the person administering the instructions also can actually surprisingly make quite a big of a difference, if let's say you're telling the child, balance, don't fall, oi, compared to okay, try your best, please balance that way, So really standardized is about min-maxing, making sure that really
it's consistent.
consistency, correct. What you're testing is accurate, and then also we we standardize our tests, well, not we lah, but in general, tests are standardized on validity as well. So not just that your test is accurate, but that it's also measuring what you intend for it to measure. So let's say, I mean, I know the most about our own CognMap, so maybe I'll give that as an example. How do we know that the balance segment of our CognMap actually measures our child's balance? Or how do we know that the eye tracking aspect of our test actually measures how well they are able to read from left to right? So all of these is part of standardized testing.
Very technical.
Very technical, yes, correct, very technical.
But huge benefits, right? I mean, in terms of helping us to understand what's going on in the child, all these behavioral manifestations that can be the same, like we talked about it in the episode on attention. A child could be, different children could be inattentive, but there could be so many reasons that's driving that. So then in order to help them, you really need to know what's driving each child, and then, have the right interventional activities for each of them.
So as a BrainFit coach, right, I think the CognMap has been very helpful in terms of tailoring the program for the child. So for instance, this parent has been complaining that the child is very weak in handwriting. Okay, he writes very messily on the paper, right? So looking at the CognMap itself and comparing all the scores within each component, as a coach, you can really actually pinpoint exactly the weak areas that contributes to the poor handwriting. So just talking about handwriting alone, you will need different skills, right? Firstly, you need to have great grip strength, right? How do you even hold the pencil or pen? And then you talk about your visual perception skills, whether you're able to gauge the spaces accurately, whether you can see the lines, perceive the lines well, so that you don't, go off the lines and you're able to stay within the lines. It could also be your eye-hand coordination, yeah. So eye-hand coordination could be just the processing from your eye to your hand. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's
different children would be, we see profiles of the children where they all have poor handwriting or bad handwriting, but then actually it's quite different. What is causing the issue, right, in each of the child?
So in terms of eye-hand coordination, all right, how we will fine-tune our program to help the child in that particular skill will be to get the child to practice even more ball catching, right? And then in turn that will help to improve their classroom behaviors when they are looking up and down from the whiteboard and copying the notes.
Yeah, I think another good example, I think handwriting is a good example. Reading is also a very good example. Like if you look at the skills, the small bits of skills needed to help a child read well, so you need to be able to visualize the letters, right? You need to have good eye tracking, make sure your eyes is not kind of skipping words, but you also need to have clear phonological sound processing in the brain, as well as working memory to retain, the meaning of what you're reading and to have good focus. So many systems are actually needed to perform well in any task. Skills that we all kind of take for granted sometimes as parents. We assume that everybody has it, but we know that it's not true. That's why we have all these, varied performances that we see in our children. So maybe you want to talk a little bit, give more information about the CognitiveMAP test?
Yeah, sure. So you were mentioning just now, let's say your child is not so great in handwriting. Maybe their grip strength is not so strong. Visual perception could be slightly weaker as well. So what does it mean? So back to a little bit about the standardized aspect. How do we know that, my child actually is weak in this particular skill? So this is where our test, our CognitiveMAP, which is standardized, I think, across more than 10,000 people at this point.
Now, yeah, it's gone up because we have updated.
Over kids as young as 4 to all the way into their later years. So basically what this standardized testing does in simple terms is it ensures that, okay, if I score, let's say, just to give an example, 100 out of 150 on my eye tracking component, it shows that among the general population, I'm actually around 66% of the general population in terms of my performance. So, it just gives you a better understanding. Yeah. And maybe to understand it better, we have a real life example.
Yeah,
a real life change.
Some real reports.
Yeah. So how about
So maybe let me clarify a little bit on testing a bit. I feel like maybe perhaps the layperson might think that you know, that people like me, I have a master's degree in pediatric physiotherapy. I'm allowed to diagnose, right? And I'm allowed to conduct standardized testing. That, you know, we don't have special knowledge or anything, but it's data that's really important. It's really all about statistics. So I give one, you know, easy example maybe for the audience to understand. Say a parent brings a child to me. The child is 5 years old, and the parent wants to know if the child has a balance issue because he's been falling down a little bit more, right? So I'm a pediatric physio, so I can do a diagnosis to see if there's a balance issue. So I will say, okay, little Johnny, let's say his name is Johnny, can you balance on one foot for me? And I will time him. So if I time Johnny, he's 5, you know, he's balancing for 10 seconds, let's say. So, and you ask me, Cheryl, is there a problem? It's 10 seconds. Is it good or is it bad? I will tell you, I have no idea. I will have no idea until I go and pull up my manual, and that's where, you know, the data is, and really look at the sample of 5-year-olds, you know. And if the data tells me that most 5-year-olds are balancing for 5 seconds, I'm going to tell you, Johnny doesn't have a problem. He's doing doubling of what everybody is doing, right? But if, you know, the data tells me that most 5-year-olds are balancing for 20 seconds, I'm going to change and now say that Johnny perhaps has a problem, right? He's doing half. So data becomes very, very useful. So you mentioned that, you know, we have up to about 10,000 data points or more now. So that's important because that's the basis which, you know, when you have a new student who comes in, we will then benchmark against that data that we have collected.
So it's different from like a traditional, let's say, school exam where it's like, it's very black and white, right? It's yes, no, just right or wrong.
Correct. So I mean, standardized testing is not like that, right? So data is really, really important to make the test as robust as we can, right? So then you have a good comparison basis. And I feel like ours is pretty good, you know, with, we can pull out some of these cases now to talk about. So maybe, yeah. So perhaps just to let the audience know, the reports that we're going to pull up, right? So it's of 3 students and they are all in primary 4. Okay, so we're comparing, you know, at least across same age band. So based on our CognitiveMAP, if you are having a blue bar, right? So this is a summary page. The report itself is quite extensive. So this is just a fraction of a page, yeah, that summarizes some of these important processes across visual, auditory, and focus. So if you see our data, a blue bar indicates that you're in the top 15 percentile of our database, right? Green is the stronger of the average, orange is the weaker of the average, and red is actually the weakest, right? The bottom 15 percentile according to our database. So now let's look at the reports. So we pull up the first student's report. You can see lots of blues and greens, very nice, right? I mean, auditory is really strong, so that's language learning. Focus is pretty good, visual is pretty good. So all the 3 core learning systems, by the way, we're just showing 3 of the 5, yeah? So we do more than that, but we're just showing the 3. So a really solid cognitive profile, isn't it? But let's find out a little bit about this child. Okay, so this student was actually in the gifted program, right, in the Singapore Gifted School, when one of the schools that run the GEP program, when he came for testing, you can see this is a profile of a very strong learner, and we can see it in his external life as well. He's doing really quite well in school. Now let's pull out a second report. So in this report, we don't have as many blues now as compared to the first one. So we have greens and a couple of orange now starting to come out around auditory, area component, and some we can see a little sneak of that in the focus area. So what do we know about this child? Also in P4, now the child is in a regular school, regular program, and subjects are scoring on average about 80%, with mom reporting that there is a more significant weakness in writing. So you can also see the kind of relative, the orange popping up, you know, at the auditory level, which is the auditory component, which is kind of your language area. Right, so that's one profile, probably a little bit more typical. And then we have the next profile of a child. We are a bit more concerned because there's showing more orange and a couple of reds there, right? And if you see what the mom is saying, this child is not doing very well in school, right? So on average, scoring about 20 to 55%, so just failing or borderline. So you can see this. I mean, the CognitiveMAP is important because it's really an insight into the internal environment of the child, isn't it? The skills that are driving the external learning. I mean, we talk about the quest to build the best learning brain. So you can't improve what you can't measure, right? So for us, the CognitiveMAP is an important first step for any child that's above 4, because we want to know what is going on that might be in the way of better performance in learning.
Right. Because, I mean, after all, we mentioned in the first episode, right? We use a very brain-based approach here at BrainFit. So naturally, we tend to lean more on the scientific side of things, where instead of just, hearing parents say, oh, my child's improved, which of course is good. Of course, that's what we want to hear too. But, we would also like to see some objective measure, that my child actually is
And of
improving.
course, at BrainFit, once the child enrolls into our programs, we then will reassess again using the CognitiveMAP to really objectively identify which areas has progressed or which area hasn't progressed even. Yeah, so then we will really use targeted exercises to push or boost the areas that are already strong, and those areas that will require even more
More work in the future.
more work.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's really this personalization, just because every person is really varied, right, with what you're really good at or not so good at. So it's very hard to have a one-size-fit-all that work for everybody. So if you really want results and targeted at your child, so I think in the future of learning will be more and more personalization. I mean, with AI and more intelligence that's coming out, I think we should be able to do it better and better, because at the end of the day, the organ that is responsible for learning, it's very varied. There is no primary 3 brain, right, in the sense, right? There are primary 3, 9-year-old children, they might have primary 5 level in certain areas, maybe movement areas, right? But maybe they have primary 1 levels function in the other areas, isn't it?
And also, the human brain is changing all the time, right? So the so-called average standard also, I'm sure some of the parents can attest to this as well, that PSLE now is way tougher than what it was before. It's just to, keep up with developments, right? So, that's why constant testing and, continually improving our testing procedure is quite important to us.
Yes, exactly, because it's one of the core pieces in helping us to understand the individual before, you can really target at each of the specific areas.
Maybe we can give like a more before and after example of a child that,
My child.
Yes, your child. Okay, let's use your child for privacy reasons. Okay.
I'm very grateful to neuroscience, right? And I'm a big believer of it, because I have obviously applied it firsthand with my oldest girl. She did PSLE last year, so I've gone through that. And let's pull out the profile of Isabel, my daughter. So you can see that was the first profile taken when she was in K2, right? That was the first year I remember. She's 13 now, but that was the first year our version 1 of the CognitiveMAP came out. So obviously she was one of my first candidates. And I was concerned when I saw the profile. Isabel is a very strong language learner. You can see all the greens and the blues, yeah. But all the yellow showing in the visual area. And I remember vividly teaching her math was very, very difficult. I remember fractions was so difficult for her to comprehend. And she was very young, obviously. But I was trying to cut the pie, the pizza, whatever, how many times. But just making sense of the numerator and the denominator, the spatial representation was very, very challenging for her. And you can see also focus, she's not hyperactive. Isabel is a quiet girl, you've met her. But she is a bit of a dreamer, yeah. So, and she doesn't focus. She doesn't stay on task as easily, right? But obviously, she's got the math weakness and the focus weakness, but she's really good with language, right? She loves to read, and I have known it since when she was 18 months, right? When she started, she could vocalize as a baby. She could read with me and finish off the last word of every sentence. It was a thick Dr. Seuss book. I remember I was so impressed. She was at 18 months, but very strong in language. So I have this child, so that's her profile, areas that I was celebrating, but areas that I was concerned about. So what happened is, next I think is quite brave. I did not enroll in tuition at all. Because for me, I decided that she was already not understanding math. I thought that sending her to math tuition would just be a waste of time, because it would be more teaching, right? Which is not solving the underlying issue. And then
and I think you'll just be overloading the brain with information that the brain can't process, right?
Yes, and then, with the children who are attending multiple tuitions, they actually get
burnt out.
Yeah, and they don't like the subject even more. So I was very concerned that she was going to really absolutely hate math. I was very careful not to put her in the tuition, but I wanted to make sure that she has the visual skills, right? I felt like I wanted her to be able to enjoy math like she enjoys words. Like math is a language, right? It's the language of numbers, of quantities. But so I wanted to have that. And obviously it was important that she was not focused. I mean, she doesn't have the focus issue anymore, because we know that with a focus issue, you can cut across all subjects, right? I mean, surely you have seen that in the class when you have no focus, every subject will become affected. So I was very concerned about that. And so apart from, I think we only had Chinese enrichment. So Isabel always attended Chinese enrichment from preschool, but we just went on a pure brain-based approach. So we targeted the activities. And at that point, if I was going to predict Isabel's scores using her K2 profile, I would say that she would probably end up scoring 60s, 70s across most subjects, because the focus wasn't there. And for math, I think she would hate that. That would be the worst. But she didn't go that way, thanks to neuroscience. So she did very well. So by about P4, I was getting this kind of profile. Let's pull up her report. So you can see a lot more greens and blues, and was so happy. By P5, she was actually invited to join the Math Olympiad class. Ellie, you remember that, right? When she
I had the privilege of having Isabel in class.
Yes.
Yeah, so I did see firsthand how her visual skills have improved, just by doing,
all our exercises.
Physical manipulations, putting them together. So that has really improved her.
All thanks to the teachers as well who work with her. So all your effort, because I didn't, physically work with her that much. So, but we targeted the exercises for her, and and she loved math. Math is one of her. I mean, she's still relatively weaker than her language subjects, but certainly not a problem. Kind of like she doesn't struggle with that. So PSLE, she DS8, into an IP program, and that's using English. So obviously that's her strength, right? And the CognMAP's useful because you also get to know the strengths, right? And then you want to exploit that as parents. Eventually PSLE, she scored an AL7. So I was really, really quite happy. And I think personally as a mom that neuroscience really changed the trajectory of her learning and her life. So,
Right. I mean, also we have other parents also who come here with, and say similar things, to us, that like, after my child is coming to bed, at first I was a bit, skeptical maybe. I mean, fair enough, because
you can't see the brain, right? You should be skeptical.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a fair concern to have. But then they notice that like, there really is tangible change that's happening here, and my child, some of these parents have been with us for like over 6 years at this point already. So
10 years.
10 years even.
The longest, 10 years. Yeah.
Right. So
I think even as simple as even tiny improvements such as remembering instructions, or even turning the head around when the parent is calling out the child's name.
Yeah, so from very, very small little changes, right? I mean, sometimes parents just say, the child just seems more mature, right? So it's all these little behaviors where they're more responsive, they're following instructions, they're more on task, so all coming together. So real change is possible. I think that's the message that we want to tell parents, that it is not like, my child is just like that. I just have to accept, because the brain at the end of the day behaves like a muscle, right? So I think, that's an important message that we want to communicate.
all right, I think maybe we can move on to the questions for today. So we have 2 questions for today. So first one, can your CognitiveMAP tell me if my child has dyslexia?
Good question. No, the CognitiveMAP is not designed to be a diagnostic test, right? So dyslexia is a difficulty with reading. And in order to have a diagnosis of dyslexia, you will need to see a psychologist who will then have to do a full IQ test, right? And then also a full reading test, right? A very comprehensive reading test.
Their own standardized test.
Correct. Their own standardized IQ test and reading test, because the diagnosis of dyslexia itself is when you have certain statistical difference, right, between the IQ test. That means based on your intelligence, you should have no problems reading, right? But if your reading scores are a certain number below your IQ test, then it allows the psychologist to say that yes, reading is significantly under par compared to your intellectual level, which is why you need that kind of testing. So CognitiveMAP is not designed to be diagnostic in nature, but what we will be able to tell you though is that why is your child perhaps not enjoying reading or not good in reading. So some of the examples we said earlier, right, like you need eye tracking, your visual perception, your phonological sounds awareness. So if the child is not good in any one of those areas or a few of those areas, then we can say that this could be contributing in a big way to the child not enjoying or not being able to read.
I think I have an example as well. So I have a girl who she looks like she pays attention in class. So she sits down, she stares at the whiteboard. So she looks like
She's paying attention.
Yeah, it looks like she's paying attention. So the parents also at first were not so concerned, but then after they did the CognitiveMAP, surprisingly all the attention scores were like red and orange section. So
Dreaming, huh?
yeah, dreaming. It gave them a better sense of ideals, right? Because without saying the student's name, the parents eventually got her checked for ADHD, because ADHD in male students and female students presents quite differently. So it really did give them, it didn't outright tell them that your child has ADHD, but it was enough to flag out an issue that we thought was important for them to know, and then they took it from there. So yeah.
Yep, so that would be valuable if you're concerned if your child has some condition. So we don't diagnose, but we might be able to give you some insights into what's going on.
Right. Okay, second question. How accurate is your CognitiveMAP test?
That's a very technical question.
Yeah.
So we think it's pretty robust. Would you guys think so? You've been using it?
I think we've talked about it a little bit just now about the standardization, but maybe we hear it from the boss herself.
So basically when you create a standardized testing, there's a few things, right? So like Ian mentioned earlier, you kind of have to prescribe the exact instructions. You've got to lay down the rules of the standard so that whether it's teacher Ellie doing the test or teacher Ian doing the test is not based on their individual styles, right? So it's standardized to the task itself, what you're supposed to execute. So the instructions, whether it's teacher Ellie or teacher Ian, would be the same, yeah? So the child receives the same information, and then that is measured across many, many children, right? Then we have consistency, right? So that the variability in results is not because the instructions was given differently. So we have ensured all of that. So that means that if I am doing a test today and tomorrow or with another trainer, I should not really see much variability. So that is what we say, that the test is repeatable or reliable, right? So we've gone on and tested that, right, in a research facility.
This also explains why, for instance, parents would think my child can't focus in a typical classroom. But however, in our CognitiveMAP test, the focus levels are very high, average, and in the excellent range. So I think it's really about that standardized testing where every child is sitting in the same controlled environment with a coach supervising them, and that's how we generate the data.
Correct. And then it's very insightful as well. If the child is able to be paying attention, right, in our standardized environment, then it's more likely that it would be the external environment. External environment could have been influencing, on the behaviors of the child, isn't it? In that case that you're mentioning.
Okay, so I think that's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you very much to parents for sending in their questions. If any listeners have any of their own questions or just want to find out more about BrainFit, where can they go?
You can visit us at our website or follow us on our socials like Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
Right. So once again, thank you very much for listening, and join us next time in our quest to build the best learning
brain.